you can tell who's being attacked, right? Browsers and firewalls, Sophos, Trend Micro, and Fortinet. And I glossed over Mozilla, but that's Firefox, right? So browsers and firewalls, there's a big trend there. And it's for a very good reason. And Microsoft holds the lion's share because Microsoft is everywhere, especially in the government.
Yeah, and Microsoft also, a lot of the, in addition to, browser-based 0 days and all that, Microsoft is particularly a notable target because they host, Microsoft Exchange servers. They've got, all of the Windows OS stuff going on. So they almost have several different areas that are targeted very aggressively, as opposed to, Apple and Google that maybe only have to worry about, iOS, Android, and some Chrome stuff. But Microsoft's got a whole host of problems.
Yeah. Stacks. Yeah. So they just have a huge attack surface they have to protect, right? All right. Network protection against zero-day attacks, and really protection overall. But by nature, zero-day attacks are difficult to defend against because of flaw in software, which no official patch or security update has been released. But there are ways to prepare and reduce the effective threat to your organization. Obviously, patch management needs to continue to be part of it, right? As soon as available, and you need to hit it, right? So maybe even out of your cycle, right? So if you have a regular cycle, put an emergency patch out as soon as that thing is ready. Just be ready. Vulnerability management, same thing. Understanding your vulnerability landscape in general. I mean, we talk about vulnerability assessments a lot. It won't necessarily catch the 0 day, right? Probably won't, in fact, but it will catch other things. And rarely do you see a 0 day exploit used on its own. Generally, there's two or three key things in an attack that makes it successful. So do what you can, right? Attack surface management, threat intelligence, and anomaly-based detection methods, especially anomaly-based detection methods, right? Because they're not signature-based, they're more likely to catch something that's novel. Patch management, question mark. Okay, so they can't prevent 0 day attacks by definition, but it can significantly reduce your exposure window, like I said. In case of a severe vulnerability, they might issue a patch within hours or days. They may also have workarounds, and keep in mind that patches take time. Oftentimes, so security researchers will come out with a workaround and say, well, if you make sure that this particular thing is off, or you make sure that this particular flag is on, then it will severely mitigate the damage and or maybe even make it null, right? So make sure you look out for those too. Maybe there's not a patch yet, but there might be a workaround. Vulnerability assessments. So again, I mentioned this before. They're not going to identify 0 days, but they will help you prepare for them. And then attack surface management. Excuse me. Asset discovery is huge, right? You need to know what you have. Rogue device identification, documentation, know what you need to remediate, and of course, continuous monitoring. Every workload adds to the attack surface, so keep that in mind. The adoption of microservices can lead to the explosion of publicly available workload. So also keep in mind the fact that microservices are great, they're self-contained, but the threat is there, it's just different. So you may have a broader attack surface, but not as deep. So it might be each container is on its own, but you may have a lot more of them, and you may have a larger attack surface to worry about. So just keep these things in mind, and just make sure what the impact is if one of those microservices become compromised. So you have known and unknown assets, and third-party or vendor assets.
And this is especially third-party vendor assets. This is growing to be a much larger portion of attack surfaces, just by nature of kind of how a lot of these things are going. A lot of vendors will host on one or more cloud services, or they might provide a service that is, is something at the surface, but then is backed up through the cloud or through, different hardware or things like that. So it's important to know that even if you're not hosting the interface or the application directly, it might still be something that could be vulnerable and could be used in like a supply chain attack.
Yeah, and then you have your shadow IT, which is essentially just things you don't know, right? What you don't know, what's undocumented. It's easy to be an oversight if you're not monitoring it properly. It's funny because this particular bullet has HVAC at the end, and it's because we actually see HVAC problems a lot. People forget that the HVAC is connected to the internet. Somebody installs it, they make sure that it's calling home via Wi-Fi, and nobody knows their HVAC is on the internet, and they have some sort of nasty vulnerability, and it's
all
ground zero.
IoT. You've got a
Yeah.
smart thermostat, it's got to call onto a server. We've seen uninterruptible power supplies that in some way have internet connection.
Right.
So
And then,
all that kind of stuff.
their firmware isn't properly updated, and
Yep.
they have some sort of vulnerability that then gets exploited. And of course, as always, we're going to recommend, as NIST does, employ independent assessors or assessment teams to monitor the controls in the system on an ongoing basis and network monitor.